The Heart of a Willow Tree. An elderly lady's journey of healing and self-discovery. In the heart of a quiet village, nestled between the peaks of towering mountains and the whispering river that wound through the valley, there lived an elderly lady named Eleanor. Her house, modest and tucked away behind a blooming garden, was surrounded by the memories of a life well lived. Its walls were lined with photographs, old books, and trinkets that spoke of days gone by, of love shared, and of quiet moments of joy and sorrow. Yet, despite the comfort of her home, Eleanor felt a quiet emptiness that had settled into the very core of her being. Her husband, James, had passed away 5 years ago, and her children, all grown and with lives of their own, lived in cities far away. She rarely saw them anymore, the distance between them growing with each passing year. Her days had become routine, an endless cycle of tending to her garden, reading old books, and sitting by the window, gazing at the world outside. While the world continued to turn, Eleanor felt as if she were frozen in time, a spectator to the lives of others, but unable to partake in them. One warm evening, as the sun began to dip behind the hills, casting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Eleanor found herself sitting by the window once more. The old chair creaked beneath her as she adjusted herself, her bones stiff from years of wear and tear. She stared out at the garden where the willow tree stood, a tall, graceful figure, its branches swaying gently in the breeze. Eleanor and James had planted that tree together years ago, when they first moved into the house. It was their symbol of love, a living testament to their bond. Over the years it had grown tall and strong, its roots deep in the soil, just as their love had once been. But now it stood there, a silent sentinel to the passage of time, a reminder of all that was lost. She could still remember the day they planted it, standing side by side in the garden, laughing and joking as they dug into the earth. James had promised that the tree would grow as long as their love did, and Eleanor had laughed, thinking of how long it would take for it to grow. She never imagined that the time would come when she would sit alone under its shade, her hands trembling with the weight of her memories. But tonight something felt different. It was as though the willow tree was calling to her, its leaves rustling in a way that seemed almost alive. Eleanor had always believed that nature had a voice, a way of speaking to those who would listen, and tonight, she felt compelled to listen. Slowly, she rose from her chair, her joints aching with the effort, but there was a sense of purpose in her steps. She made her way to the door, opening it to the cool evening air. The garden, bathed in the soft glow of twilight, felt peaceful, almost sacred. Eleanor stood in the middle of the garden, the willow tree before her, its branches reaching toward the heavens. She placed her hand gently on the rough bark of the tree, closing her eyes for a moment. The tree had witnessed so many seasons, spring with its blossoms, summer with its shade, autumn with its golden leaves, and winter with its bare branches. It had weathered storms, both literal and metaphorical, and yet it stood strong. Eleanor could feel its strength, its resilience, deep within her own chest. In that moment, memories of James flooded her mind. The sound of his voice, the way he would hold her close when the world felt too overwhelming, the way he would laugh at her silly jokes. She remembered the way he would tell her stories under the willow tree, how they would talk about their hopes and dreams for the future. They had planned to grow old together, to sit beneath the tree, watching their children and grandchildren play in the garden. But life had different plans, and James was gone. Eleanor's heart ached, the pain of loss so deep that it felt as if it would consume her. But as she stood there, her hand on the willow tree, something shifted within her. The tree had endured loss too. It had lost branches in storms, it had withstood the weight of heavy snowfalls, and yet it continued to grow, continued to stand tall. Maybe that's the secret, Eleanor whispered to the tree, her voice barely above a breath. We must continue to grow, no matter what we lose. A cool breeze swept through the garden, and Eleanor took a deep breath, letting the fresh air fill her lungs. She closed her eyes again, and this time she didn't feel the weight of her grief. Instead, she felt a sense of peace, a deep, comforting stillness. The willow tree had taught her something in that moment. It had shown her that even in the face of loss, there could be growth, there could be healing. Eleanor stayed by the tree for a long while, her thoughts meandering through memories of her past, of the love she had shared with James, of the laughter and the tears. But as she stood there, she realized that the love they had shared was not gone. It lived on, not just in her heart, but in the very earth beneath her feet. The tree, the garden, the house, they were all filled with the echoes of that love. The next morning, Eleanor woke with a sense of lightness that had been absent for years. She rose early before the sun had fully risen, and stepped outside to the garden. The willow tree stood tall and proud, its branches bathed in the first light of dawn. Eleanor smiled, her heart swelling with a new sense of purpose. Over the following weeks, Eleanor began to change. She started taking walks through the village, greeting her neighbors with a smile. She began volunteering at the local community center, teaching the children how to garden and care for plants. She started writing letters to her children, not just about the mundane things in life, but about her dreams, her hopes, and her thoughts. And slowly, the emptiness that had once filled her heart began to fade, replaced by a quiet joy that came from living fully in the present. One evening, as the sun began to set again, Eleanor sat beneath the willow tree. She looked up at its branches, now lush and full, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. The tree had been there for her, not just as a symbol of the past, but as a living reminder that life was full of second chances, of opportunities to heal and grow. She whispered softly, "Thank you for reminding me, my old friend. I still have so much to live for." And with that, Eleanor closed her eyes, a peaceful smile on her lips, and for the first time in a long while, she felt the weight of grief lift completely. The love of the past was still with her, but now she could live again, her heart open to the beauty of the world around her. The willow tree stood tall beside her, its branches swaying gently in the evening breeze, a symbol of resilience, love, and the promise of new beginnings.